Ladies and gentlemen, as we begin our funeral service today, I'm going to ask if we can turn off or silence all cell phones and electronic devices. Thank you.
Welcome. A loving mother, sister, daughter, grandmother, niece, aunt, and more. Vera Schock lived until 93 years old, full of life, 93 years. She had a life full of music, of family, and of commitments, a life of theater, of humor, of support for Israel and the Jewish people. She lived a lot of life in her 93 years on this earth, and today we gather in loving celebration of that life, raising up her best attributes and forming a community around those who loved her most in life. To those here with us in person, Bruchim Habayim, welcome. To those watching and joining with us on the live stream, welcome as well. Your presence joins with us in this chapel, and your intentions of loving support fill this space as we gather as a sacred community, both in person and virtually, to honor the life of Vera Schock. My name is Rabbi Nathan Weiner. I'm the rabbi of Congregation Beth Tikva in Marlton, New Jersey. It's an honor to be present with each of you here today, to mourn this immense loss and to celebrate Vera's life with you. Now, I did not know Vera in life, but I had the opportunity to spend some time yesterday meeting with a number of members of her family, including her children, Chuck and Judy, and her sister Elaine. What I didn't share with you yesterday is that today marks the first yahrzeit, the first anniversary on the Hebrew calendar of the passing of my brother, Rob, of blessed memory, Reuven Yitzchak ben Zalman Pesach v'Yocheved. And so it was 1 year ago today on the Jewish calendar where I sat where you are sitting as a mourner for the first time. So for me personally, this time with you in memory of Vera is, in a way, a gift. My brother's interred at Crescent Memorial Park, where we will all be headed following this chapel service. And the ability for me to be able to say Kaddish there with you is an unintended mitzvah that Vera has done for me. I've also been holding, as this is my yahrzeit, that we are in the Jewish month of Adar. In Adar, the month containing the holiday of Purim, we say, Misha nichnas Adar marbim b'simcha. When we enter the month of Adar, joy increases. Yet, here we are, at the funeral of someone that you all love so dearly. How can we allow joy to increase at this time of immense loss? You know, in our Jewish tradition, we say that the body is temporary, but the soul is eternal. And the fullness, the being, the essence of someone with an impact like Vera's doesn't end with death. It lives on with each of you who carry her memory and her legacy forward. She remains bound eternally through you to the bond of life. So together in that vein, I invite us to take a moment in quiet contemplation and meditation, to allow a positive memory of Vera to be front and center in your mind. Perhaps when you do this, it'll bring a tear to your eye. Perhaps it'll bring a smile to your face or a chuckle at something funny in an encounter that you had with her. And all these things are appropriate. Vera lived 93 years. And together today, we celebrate her in her impact. So I invite you now to take a moment in quiet to allow that memory to come to mind. As you come back from your meditation, I ask that may our time together today have purpose and deep meaning, and may it honor well Vera's memory, who passed away just a few short days ago on Thursday evening. More formally, we join together today to honor Vera Shak, Devora bat Ben Sion Visara, Zichronah Livracha of blessed memory. Vera is predeceased by her parents, Shirley and Benjamin, of blessed memory. Also, her loving aunts and uncles, all of blessed memory. Minnie and her husband Meyer, Edith and her husband Jack, Pauline and her husband Herman, Marty and his wife Tanya, Lena and her partner Sam, Dave and his wife Kitty, Joe and his wife Rose. She's also predeceased by her husbands of blessed memory, Stanley Snyderman and Paul Schock. Vera is survived by her children, her son Charles and his wife April and her daughter Judy, her grandsons David Snyderman and Daniel Cohen, her sister Elaine, her nieces Bonnie and Lori's husband Ray and their children Matthew and Mitchell, her nephew Greg and his wife Lucy and their children David and Brian, grandnieces Zoe and Jenna, grandnephew Jacob, her stepson Shmuel and his wife Tamar, and their children Shira, Pinchas, and Yitzchak. Vera is also survived by many nieces and nephews, including her surviving cousins Jerry Kasner and Donnie Kastner and Jerry Leader. I hope I got all the names correct. Okay. May your love and care for one another, God willing, carry you through this difficult transition. I'm now going to recite Tehillim. Psalm 23, a psalm universal across the Abrahamic faith traditions at moments of grief and loss. I'll recite it first in the Hebrew, followed by the English. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai ro'i lo achzar, binoteshe yarbitzeni al mei menuchot yinahaleni. Nafshi yeshoviv yancheni b'maglei tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech bagetz al mavet lo irara ki ata imadi. Shivtecha umishantecha hema yenachamuni. Ta'aroch lefanai shulcha neged zorarai, tishanta v'shemen roshi kosira vaya. Ach tov v'chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai, v'shavti b'veit Adonai le'orech yamim. A psalm of David. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Amen. Amen. From Ecclesiastes, there is a time for everything and a season for every activity under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to tear down and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to scatter stones and a time to gather them up, a time to embrace and a time to refrain, a time to search and a time to give up, a time to keep and a time to throw away, a time to tear and a time to mend, a time to be silent and a time for speaking. Now is certainly a time for speaking, as many members of the family are going to offer words of a hesped to uphold the kavod, Vera's honor. I'm going to begin by sharing the words sent by Jerry Kastner, who wrote that Vera was the only cousin to keep in touch with us. She was a fountain of knowledge on the history of the family. She knew, even as recently as a few years ago, the chronology of when each of our aunts and uncles came from Europe to the U.S. During our phone conversation, she would glowingly talk about the accomplishments of her family's and Elaine's. She always had a positive attitude about her life. I'm now going to invite up her nephew Greg to share some words.
So my Aunt Vera, I knew my entire life. One thing I really remember is our drives over Lincoln Drive from Wynnefield Heights to Mount Airy. And I got to know Lincoln Drive really well. And to this day, I have an affinity to Lincoln Drive. And I always think of my aunt when I drive Lincoln Drive. More recently, we got to see my Aunt Vera at our house during Jewish holidays. We got to see her at Lori's house, especially when the twins were young, and at Bonnie's house at other various get-togethers. And what surprised me and what I remember is there were times when we would have a conversation. You're at a family party and, it can get a little boring. And I would have a conversation with her, and she would be so knowledgeable about so many things. It was really interesting. And I guess I shouldn't be surprised about how these conversations were so in-depth about so many different topics, because I think our whole family is smart. So that's what I remember about my aunt, and I finally remember these conversations that we could have, and her breadth of knowledge and interest in things. Thank you.
Now invite Shmuel.
There's a tradition that if we want to know the essence of something, we can look for where it appears in the Torah. In this world, Vera went by Vera, but her real name is Devorah. So I looked around for a Devorah, and I see that there are many similar characteristics between the biblical Devorah and our Devorah. So who was Devorah? When the Jewish people left Egypt and conquered the land of Israel before King Saul and King David, the Jews were led by the judges, and Devorah was one of these judges, and she was also a prophet. So leading the Jewish people was never an easy task. I think Vera knew that, that kind of job takes strength and resolve and the ability to stand up when necessary. And Vera, I think, had those character traits. She was strong-willed. She was not afraid to speak her mind, and if she didn't think something was right, she would tell you about it. And these are the traits of a leader. She was very involved in communal affairs. She established and led the Bris Sholem Singles Lodge for many years. She was certainly a person of principle. I remember one time she said that she got the invitation to this annual dinner for her lodge, and on the appetizers was, I think it was shrimp cocktail. And she was so upset about that. Now, she felt that it was okay, everyone can make up their own mind of whether they want to eat kosher or not eat kosher, but for a Jewish organization to serve shrimp, it was not right. And she, actually, her and my father, even she was on the board, her and my father, I think, boycotted the dinner that year. So, but she was a person of principle, no question about that. So I know also that she was a very prolific writer. She used to also write for that organization and did editorials. She was also clearly a dedicated mother and grandmother, and she lived for her family. She was always tell us how she was visiting with the kids, and she had such joy from that. As the rabbi had so eloquently said, so we have just begun the month of Adar, and we're coming out of the cold winter, except for those in Florida who are coming into the cold winter. But we're now coming out of the cold winter into the spring. My father, Alav Shalom, also died in Adar, so his yard site is actually a week from today. So in Adar, as the rabbi said, we are supposed to increase our happiness because we're approaching the holiday of Purim and ultimately this holiday of our redemption of Passover. And although under the circumstances, we need to temper our happiness right now, we can look forward to the ultimate redemption when we are all reunited. May it be quickly in our days. So, Vera, on behalf of myself and Tamar, if there was anything that we did or said that upset you in any way, anything that was not part of your dignity, please, you'll forgive us.
Now invite Vera's friend from her time at the Weston Club, Lois, to share some words.
I first met Vera in the mailroom at our apartment building. She was the first person, well, I first met her in the mailroom, and she was the first person I had met there. How lucky it was for me. She taught me the ropes at the Weston Club where we lived. She told me where everything was. She told me how to get to all the different buildings. And she invited me into her Mahjong group and to her Tuesday night dinner group at the Weston Club. We palled around often, and she always kept me in stitches because she was always able to see the irony and the humor in so many situations. She was also a marvelous writer, and she wrote several articles for our Weston Club paper. Joel Elson, the editor, considered Vera one of his top writers. I will miss seeing Vera on our Friday night Shabbat Zoom service. Chuck, too, although you're more than welcome to come. Even though Vera had moved a good distance away and we only saw each other by long-distance Zoom, my feelings for Vera always remained the same because she truly was the real deal.
And her niece, Lori.
When we spoke to the rabbi last night, he suggested that we write down our thoughts so we wouldn't ramble. And anyone here knows that I can tell a really long story, so I put it in bullet points. So our first point is that Aunt Vera sure was fashionable. She was always color coordinated, always tailored, and she could really rock a statement necklace. She loved a good family get-together for a laugh, a hug, or, as Greg said, a stimulating conversation with one of her great nephews at Greg and Lucy's for Thanksgiving, at Bonnie's for one of Mom's epic pool parties for her birthday, or at our house for Jacob's many themed birthday parties. Speaking of Jacob, I think when you heard him in the back before, he was just communicating with Aunt Vera, so please excuse his noise, but he and Aunt Vera were chatting. She was the family historian. Whenever someone wanted to know Aunt Minnie's husband's name or what year Bubby came over to America, we just picked up the phone and we called Aunt Vera. One of my favorite memories of Aunt Vera is how she always called Mom Schwester. And just with glee, every time we walked into Thanksgiving or every time the phone rang, Schwester, Schwester, where's my Schwester? So now, Bonnie, I think that you and I will take over the Schwester role. And then in time, Jenna and Zoe, you must call each other Schwester. She loved going out to eat. She had her favorite places around here, as you all know. And then once she went to Florida with April and Chuck, she couldn't wait till we came down to visit those few times. She had her favorite seafood places, and we have that one picture in the lobby of her holding up her lobster. So she just loved it. She would tell me of the wonderful places you took her to and how well that you treated her. And I would be remiss without taking a minute here to say, I'm going to cry, but it was really wonderful once she came down there, the life that you gave her. And once the pandemic hit, when she came and stayed with you, and particularly these last couple of weeks, she was truly blessed. Okay, I don't know how I'm going to go back to my bullets after that, but she loved various activities, and when the Weston Club formed that chorus, I remember she was so excited to sing in it, and she told us all about it, and we came to see her, and she had Mom sitting front and center because she got to sing in front of her professional singer sister, and she was so proud of herself. And most of all, she loved being with family. When we lived in Jacksonville for a short time, she flew down there over and over again to push the double stroller, to hang out and see what Jacob was up to, and just to be with family. She and Mom held the twin babies all of the time when we lived in Media. She had sleepovers in Delaware with us over and over again. She kept some of her stuff there at our house. And I remember once when we moved into one of our new houses, she asked, "Is there room for your beloved aunt?" "Always, Aunt Vera. There's always room for you."
Zoe and Jenna.
Aunt Vera was closer than just a great aunt to Jacob, Zoe, and I. She was like another grandmother. I remember Aunt Vera, Zoe, Mum, and I were always together when I was a baby. Aunt Vera took care of us when she came over to visit and was a huge part of growing up. The most vivid memory I have of Aunt Vera was when she would take us up to the guest room bathroom in Delaware, and she would put blue eyeshadow on me and Zoe, and she would put her jewelry and put her clothes on us and pretend like we were mini hers. And, and it made us feel so grown up, and she even told us not to tell Mom and Dad, so it was like our little secret with Aunt Vera. To this day, whenever I think about Aunt Vera, I think about how important and loved she made me feel, and how she always prioritized talking to me and making sure that I was loved and well taken care of, and I'll forever miss you, Aunt Vera.
Okay, to my wonderful Aunt Vera, it is hard to put into words about how I feel about her. She was the ultimate encourager. She used to say how proud she was of me. And as you might hear from others up here, she was someone who made you want to be your best. Every time I got to see Aunt Vera, no matter how often, there were pictures upon pictures of me and my sister. And when we see her friends, and they'd say, are these the girls I hear so much about? I love how she took so much pride in us. She would always take other people into consideration and make them really feel like they were the most special person ever and part of her family. But really, a person who can make you feel that way really is the most special person ever. She was one of the best people I will or have ever known. She will forever live to my memory. My Aunt Vera.
Bonnie.
Hi. Hard to follow this. I have so many fond memories of my Aunt Vera. We indeed had a very special relationship. She would tell me stories of experiences when I was little, didn't remember. I spent a lot of time at her house, learning to swim in a lake, apparently, in a bathing suit 6 times too big. Yours, I guess. And ice skating with my cousin. And Judy and me and Aunt Vera having her first special girls' sleepovers. Of course, many of the memories centered around holidays, singing with my mother and my grandmother, serving family recipes, hearing many stories of her growing up with all of her aunts and my grandmother's sisters. I could picture them all because she was such an amazing storyteller. While searching for the best descriptive words for my aunt in recent days, what I came up with was driven, multi-talented, but most of all, sassy. And I will share some of her sassy stories with you. I loved her dearly. She would be your biggest supporter, but she was not one to hide how she felt or spare a left-handed compliment. If you'll indulge me, once while lounging in my pool, she looked over to the right and asked point blank, "Where did you get that belly?" It was to a man, where he upon responded, "At the belly store." They both had a chuckle because she really liked it when you gave it right back to her. She did. I loved Thanksgivings at my house because she would always stay the night and we would have the next day to pal around and do, some fun things. So that was extra special time with her that no one else had. She had so many hobbies and belonged to many clubs and community centers. And one of the stories my boys shared was how she went on a really great trip to see a show, a bus trip from one of these outings. She's on the bus, and of course, front and center, she gets a picture taken of her, and it's put in the newsletter. It's cool, right? So she brings the newsletter and the photo to the next family outing and proceeds to show it to everyone in the room. Did not realize she was taking a poll. Does this look like me? And of course, everyone was like, "Wow, cool, right, that's great." No, wrong answer, wrong answer. No, who is that woman? I never saw her in my life. She did not like that picture, and I tried to head everybody off with the right answer, but I thought it was beautiful. Anyway, I went to visit her often at the Weston Club and her other communities. We shopped and had lunch like girlfriends do. And one night in Florida, before dinner in her fancy dining room, I went to help her get ready for dinner. I brought all my hair products, got out the blow dryer, and much to my horror, with all the products she already had in her hair, I managed to erect a large section of hair that completely defied gravity and stuck straight out to here. I was terrified. I broke her wig. She talked me down from the ledge and fixed it, and we did end up having a lovely dinner with her neighbors. I admired her very much and marveled at all the things she was so good at. I'll never forget her playing the piano. And did I mention singing? Always singing. Writing, playing, mahjong, being a leader in many settings. She will be missed in my household very dearly.
David.
Like this. Vera was my grandmother, and she really liked to sing and loved music. My dad inherited her love of singing and music from her, and I inherited that from him. She especially liked Frank Sinatra music. She also really enjoyed comedy, Like she would watch Seinfeld like every day, and she also liked Mel Brooks movies. She even had like her own catchphrase that at least she would say with me. I think when I asked her how she was doing, she would say, "I make a living," and then like I would say it back to her a lot of the time. She used to, when she was living in Cherry Hill, there was this diner that we always went to like every single time that she loved. So she really adored her son Charles, my father, Dad, and April's dogs. She would often like have a big smile petting them and interacting with them. She really loved the dogs. And I also really appreciate both Dad and April taking care of her because she needed like a lot of help. So they were very good. Thank you for helping her with this. I love you guys. I miss you, Grandma.
And lastly, Chuck.
Boy, my son is a tough act to follow. As all of you were speaking, some additional thoughts came to mind that I wanted to share. Shmuel mentioned, I think, dessert or some food. There was a running joke in our family that every time my mother would go to an affair where they had round tables and lots of guests and food served, there'd always be an empty seat next to her. And she'd be eyeing the fruit cup that nobody came to eat. And then the meal came, and she'd be eyeing the fruit cup that's still there. And somebody would say, "Why don't you eat it?" She said, "Okay." She ate it, and 2 minutes later, the guest showed up. Where's my fruit cup?" It happened more than once. The other thing I can tell you about my mother is her driving. She had a rule, when you get to an intersection and you don't know where to go, just go left. When she first started driving, we, with her behind the wheel, went to the Northeast in Philly, and we were looking for Corvette. I forget the name of the store. Anyway, what's that? No, but anyway, Corvettes, I think. Anyway, so we go into a gas station, finally, after driving around. And she says to the gas station person, "Can you tell me where this is?" He says, "Lady, it's right across the street." The other thing she did, and I'll tell about this, Mom, and she used to laugh when I reminded her, is whenever I was at camp and she came up to visit me at camp, before she left, she'd want to use the bathroom in my cabin. And I go, "Oh no," because 9 times out of 10, she came out and broke the toilet. She'd say, "I'm sorry, it's not working anymore." So that was one of our favorite jokes. My mom was a real protector of me. Always looking out for me. In the last few weeks of her life when she was in the hospital, I started doing a crossword puzzle, and she looked at me and said, "Do you have enough light?" She was always concerned about me, always. When I was a little boy, I had some kind of surgery. I don't remember what it was. And she knew I was scared, and she gave me 4 pennies to hold. And when I came out of that surgery, I still had the 4 pennies in my hand. And I was surprised when she moved in with us that she still has those 4 pennies after 70 years. She saved all of my report cards from elementary school, even from nursery school, my report cards. When I say she protected me, sometimes a little too much. I was in high school and I was standing on the corner waiting for public transportation, and the bus pulled up and I got on with some of my friends, and the bus started to move, and all of a sudden we hear brakes screeching and the bus slams on his brake because a car pulls right in front of the bus to stop it. The doors open, my mother says, "Chuck, you forgot your glasses." Needless to say, I was embarrassed in front of all of my friends. She always told me how proud she was of me, and she did that with all of the family. When she met people at the Weston Club, here in Florida, even in the hospital, she'd introduce me. "This is my little boy," she would say. She taught me manners. It was very important to her. And to this day, when I'm on an elevator, I always make it a point to let the women walk out first, because that's what she taught me to do. I think my son mentioned this, but when she was in our house in hospice, the first thing the nurse said to her was, "Vera, I'm your nurse. Are you comfortable?" And her response was, "I make a living." We had a routine in our house. Every night we'd watch Wheel of Fortune and then Jeopardy. And then she'd get up and say, "I'm going to my room." And she'd give me a hug and a kiss. And I would say, "Good night, Virla." And she'd say, "Good night, Chucky." And the last three things I want to say are, for the last 3 years, Mom was under the constant care of April. His compassion and patience and love toward my mom were a real blessing. And believe me, it wasn't easy for April. But I want to publicly thank her for doing everything she did and setting aside her own needs for that of my mom. I mentioned those 4 pennies earlier, and I want you to know that Mom is holding now those 4 pennies. And I hope it eases her journey like it eased mine. And the last thing I want to say is good night, Virla. I love you.
It's with these loving intentions and memories in mind that we move to the central prayer of a Jewish memorial service, El Malei Rachamim, which asks that as we prepare for her to be interred, that her soul be granted true rest on the wings of God's divine presence. If it's physically comfortable for you to do so, I invite you to please rise. I'll read it first in the English, followed by the chanting in the Hebrew. O God, full of compassion, who dwells on high, grant true rest upon the wings of the Shekhinah, the divine presence, in the exalted spheres of the holy and pure, who shine as resplendence of the firmament to the soul of Vera Shak, who has gone to her eternal home. For charity has been donated in remembrance of her soul, may her place of rest be in the Garden of Eden. Therefore, may the All-Merciful One shelter her with the cover of God's wings forever and bind her soul in the bond of life. Adonai is her heritage. May she rest in her resting place in peace, and let us say, Amen. El Malei Rachamim, Shochen Bamromim, Hamitzei Menucha Nechona, Al Kanfei Hashchina, B'malot Kedoshim Utehorim, Kezohar Harakia Mazhi, Hirim. Et Nishmat Devora Bat Ben Sion Vesara. Shehalcha Le'olama. Ba'avor Shenadvu Tzadaka Ba'ad Hazkarat Nishmata. Began Eden Dehe Menuchata. Lachen Bal Harachamim Yastireha Beseter Kenafav Le'olamim. Vitzror Bitzror Hachayim Et Nishmata. Adonai Hu Nachalata. Vitanuach Al Mishkava B'Shalom. Vinomar. Amen. Please be seated. Our time together here at the chapel is drawing to a close. Some brief announcements. First, the family asks that donations in lieu of flowers please be made to the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation according to her wishes in honor of her grandson, David. Guests, family, and friends are welcome as well following interment to join together at Ponzio's in Cherry Hill for visits of consolation.
Just finger in the middle of both these gentlemen. One on each side. If we go rise once more.
Those who run